Welcome to PASSIONEER Magazine, the podcast, where you'll hear inspirational stories, encouraging news, and in-depth interviews with authors, influencers, CEOs, and thought leaders. PASSIONEER Magazine, the podcast. Bold ideas, brave pursuits, boundless inspiration. Hello. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining me here on PASSIONEER Magazine, the podcast. I am so happy to have you with me.
So glad to be here as well.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Now, I have to admit, this is the first time we are having a conversation about this topic. So I want to jump right in. However, I realize that I may be introducing you to some brand new listeners, to brand new viewers. So before we get started, and I'll let you decide who's going to go first here, please take a moment to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Chumbow. I'm the Advocacy and Survival Leadership Director with the Human Trafficking Legal Center, and I'm also a survivor of child forced labor from Cameroon to the United States.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm Xanthe Scharff. I'm the Managing Director for External Relations at the Freedom Fund, which is a fund that works to stop modern slavery or trafficking and child marriage by supporting frontline groups in the countries where we work.
Welcome, welcome. Ladies, like I said, I have so many questions for you, but I also want to be respectful of your time. So we're going to jump right in. My first question for you is, we often think of, when we hear the word slavery, we think of what has only happened here in the United States. However, we're starting to understand that that is not exclusively true. So when you speak about slavery, not the historic, but the present, how do you explain modern day slavery to people and the fact that it's still going on?
All right, so I'll kick it off. So the way I would say, again, we do talk about slavery, and a lot of the times we just think of slavery in the past. In my situation, I like to consider myself as a survivor of modern day slavery, right? Especially when it comes to children that have been enslaved. When we talk about slavery, a lot of times we don't focus on children. There were children that were also enslaved back then and also now. You know, slavery has been redesigned, and which is why it's called modern day slavery. I will share a bit about my experience. I was born in Cameroon, and I was told that I was going to come to the United States, especially knowing the country, knowing that the United States slavery back then was abolished in 1865. I never thought that I would come here and become a victim of modern day slavery, especially at such a young age, at age 9. You know, so when I got here, I was forced to cook and clean and took care of my traffickers' children, right here in Silver Spring, Maryland. So my situation, not far from the White House, you know, it happens, and it happens a lot of the time to so many, especially when we are talking about labor trafficking. I know a lot of the times when people think of modern day slavery or trafficking, they automatically think sex trafficking, but you also have so much when it comes to labor trafficking, and so much of that are being impacted by children like myself.
So to add on, Dr. Angela, everything Evelyn said, she talked about labor trafficking, she talked about sex trafficking. We also think of forced marriage as a form of modern day slavery, whether girls or women or boys or men who have been forced into a union that they did not choose. We see all these different forms in the US and outside the US, but around the world, it's 50 million people who are in some form of modern slavery. The connecting tissue between all these different types is that a person is forced to do something. Someone else is benefiting off of them in ways that they don't want and are not benefiting from, not choosing themselves. We in the US see 1 million people in some form of modern slavery. So these numbers are really staggering. The 50 million, if you break it down, that's 1 in 150 people. It's the highest recorded number in history. And in the US, that's 3 people in 1,000. So these are really big numbers.
Oh my goodness. When you put the numbers out there, it really does help you grasp what's going on. We do hear the stories, and like you ladies have said, many times we think that it is just the sex trafficking, and we forget that it is children as well. We're thinking, perhaps someone 16 to 25, kind of like that high school or that college young lady that's been snatched, and shipped off to another country. We never think about how it could be happening right around where we are. Like you said, it happened for you, Evelyn, in the state of Maryland. I don't think that most Americans would have thought that was the case. Thank you for bringing that to light. Now, I want to ask you both a question. Evelyn, you lived the experience, challenged. And most people could never wrap their minds around that. But you have started to talk about the assumptions that people make about trafficking. Dr. Xanthe, your work highlights the systemic blind spots that we have as a society, from policy to funding to just simply turning a blind eye. Where do you see the biggest need for the public to help you in the work that you're doing from your various aspects?
So I'll go first. So, for me, like, like you said, I don't want to keep repeating the fact that I was a child, but it's so important to just remember, right? But also not also to also think about where the situation happened right here in the United States, and not in some off crazy place, but in a suburb, in a nice area, right? My trafficker lived in places like Potomac, Maryland, right? People will never think about that, right? And over there, you have a lot of wealthy people. And not only that, I was a domestic servitude, at that young age. And there were so many people that came in contact with me. And not only that, my trafficker also had a business, right? She was also a business person, And when we talk about labor trafficking, I always say this, like, the reason we don't want to address labor trafficking a lot of the time, because most of us are guilty of it, right? And if you think of the history of slavery, it was built from forced labor, right? But not only forced labor, but sexual exploitation, right? And a lot of us experience both of it, that we don't talk about it. There were children my age that were working in the fields, that were working in the home. They had to take care of their master's children. And that was the same thing that happened to me. And the worst part is, even with all this abuse that I faced in my trafficking situation, I was unpaid. There was restitution order that I never received, right? And not only that, I was forced to take care of 2 kids, no school from age 9 until 17. And I had to take off my clothes. One of the punishment I got was my trafficker would beat me. I had to literally take off my clothes and I would get beat. And then if I don't, there were days and weeks that I'll go without eating, right? Because I didn't do the job right, and that's why I feel like we really need to also start focusing on so many type of trafficking, and also look and not only focusing in one part, and know that it does happen in the subway. And a lot of the times are people that are wealthy, because my trafficker was wealthy not only in the United States but also in Cameroon, where I'm from, which is Central Africa.
So Evelyn is the founder of the Harriet Tubman Scholarship Fund, which supports survivor leaders. And so that is one way that people can get involved and can support. And as you can hear and see, Evelyn is a tremendously talented leader who is in a position to help other survivors to go on their path as leaders, to develop themselves, but also to then be a hand up for others. And that is the message that Evelyn and I share, because Freedom Fund is also focused on supporting survivor leaders, but also supporting community leaders in the countries where we work. Our work is outside the US. We're working in South Asia and Africa, and in 2 places in Brazil. But what is a common thread for us is that we believe that, especially today, where governments have pulled back from bilateral aid, that we have to get the money to the hands of the people who know the issue best, know the issue inside and out, and are committed and have, in many cases, devoted their lives and will not stop until they are able to drive solutions. So, the Harriet Tubman Fellowship is a really special opportunity. And Evelyn also works with the Human Trafficking Legal Resource Center, which is a partner of the Freedom Fund as well, which provides legal services for survivors and does vital advocacy work. The Freedom Fund is we raise funds and we push those funds to frontline organizations and then support them to build the movement in those countries so that solutions are developed. And that does include policy solutions too, making sure that policy frameworks include protections for victims, protections for children, um, uh, individual legal cases, that sort of thing. And so we do that by raising money. So for folks who are in a position to make donations, we're always looking for that kind of support. These gifts, those financial gifts, are in fact gifts of freedom, and they go far in the hands of survivors and community leaders.
Oh, I love how you said that the financial gifts are gifts of freedom. And so many people need to definitely, when they're asking themselves, how can I make a difference? What can I do to be the change? If you cannot volunteer your time, I am a very big advocate of just like they say in church, it is your time, your talent, or your treasure. And sometimes it is our treasure that really is the biggest difference in the world. Well, Dr. Xanthe, I want to stay along kind of that same vein there with the projected $60 billion and tell me if that number has increased reduction in U.S. global aid. What are the real world consequences for anti slavery efforts, both domestically and internationally?
So it's not just the US that has pulled back aid, but it's also countries in Europe. Around the world, there's a shifting in the way that countries are spending their resources, with more staying at home, more going into military spending. So the world as we know it has changed, at least for now. The international aid architecture that supported so many organizations is fundamentally changed. And it does mean that there are a lot of organizations out there looking for the same resources. It means that the dollars need to go further. And so that's where we feel really strongly that we've got to get the money out of the middle and into the front lines. We've got to get that money to the front lines, because when it's on the front lines of the people who are committed and are going every day to make change, that's when we're going to really see it go the furthest. And I'll tell you a quick story, because I just came back from Ethiopia, where I was visiting with one of our partners named Padet. This partner is a long time on the front lines working against the issue of child domestic workers. So, like what Evelyn described, but in this case in Ethiopia, not in the US, young kids from rural areas who are brought into the city to work in homes. And they work with watch groups, which are organizations of mothers who go, and they need to raise awareness and they need to call people out when this is happening. The mothers told me that to get to some of these adults who have these kids in their homes, they have to knock on their front door. Sometimes they'll go back 15 times in a row before they can get the person to open the door and have a face-to-face conversation with them. And so that's the power of working with people on the front lines.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Ladies, I think that you have definitely opened the eyes to so many. Sometimes it shocks me, it surprises me how much we do not know or how little we do know. But I know that your being on is definitely going to make someone say, I need to get involved. I want to know more. what can I do? I too need to be someone who's about change. And you never know which individual out there, what brand, what company, what organization can lend their voice, their time, their treasure, or their talent to help this become the all that it can be. I want to say thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. We have a part 2 that is right around the corner. So thank you for sharing in this part 1 of the series. Now, if someone wants to reach out to you, what is the best way to do that?
Well, they can reach out to me. We do have the Human Trafficking Legal Center, the info at htlegalcenter.org. You can reach out, but you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. My first and last name, Evelyn Chumbow.
And LinkedIn for me as well, Xanthe Scharff or xsharff at freedomfund.org. Freedomfund.org is where you can sign up for our socials as well, our newsletter. And if you'd like to donate, that's the place to do it as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Angela.
Thank you, ladies, both for opening our eyes.
Thank you for listening to PASSIONEER Magazine, the podcast.